Despite a lurking $5 billion budget gap, Mayor Michael Bloomberg keeps finding ways to do business in New York City. In taking on the city's shortage of affordable housing, he proposes to creatively invest $3 billion over the 5 years to produce 65,000 critically needed housing units, new and rehabilitated, for low and middle income New Yorkers. Mr. Bloomberg's plan will not by itself turn around the city's housing crisis, but in a time of fiscal constraints, it is ambitious. And for the first time since Edward Koch was mayor, it puts the city back into the business of driving housing development. Left to market forces under Mr. Bloomberg's predecessor, Rudolph Giuliani, the housing supply continued to deteriorate and dwindle. While the city's population grew by more than 100,000 in the 1930s, only 82,000 housing units were built, spurred in part by the shortage. The cost of housing soared out of reach of many compelling households to double or triple up. The least fortunate joined the growing number of homeless. Mr. Bloomberg addresses not only the financing for new housing, but the obstacles that private builders of multifamily dwellings have encountered in New York. The mayor seeks to lend as much as $500 million in assets of the Housing Development Corporation to private real estate developers. Credit raters say the plan should not harm the AA standing of the corporation, one of the nation's strongest housing agencies. Another $500 million is money that would have been spent to maintain city-owned apartments which have been sold. The bulk of the money, $2 billion, will come from the city's capital and expense budget. The Bloomberg plan calls for rezoning to add new residential areas and would give grants to clean up polluted and neglected areas along the waterfront for development, pending approval from the City Council, which has generally welcomed the plan. To help some of those who need housing most, the mayor wants to assist qualified first-time home buyers with closing costs. Taken together with the recently reformed electrical code and the proposed simplification of the building code, the new measures, after a comprehensive approach to the city's housing crunch, will be applied. If you took the trouble to consult a weather map on Christmas morning, you would have seen a remarkable sight, the track of a long belt of bad weather reaching from western Kansas all the way up into New England. Forecasters predicted that the storm would hit the East Coast in the early morning, but the snow didn't begin to fall in earnest until early afternoon. In every other aspect, this was a truly timely winter storm. It caught most travelers already at their destinations, and on a day when they could sit back, have a second helping of Christmas dinner, and watch the snow blot out the horizon. As the snowfall came to an end late last night, the wind picked up, and in the morning it had driven the snow into scallops and cornices all across the landscape and done it effortlessly. But there was nothing effortless about the plowing out. Snow crews worked through the night all across the Northeast and didn't begin to catch up until yesterday morning. At the edge of nearly every sizable piece of tarmac, a range of snowy peaks arose like some minor Himalaya. Many homeowners, armed only with plastic snow plows, or perhaps an underpowered snow blower, found themselves completely overmatched by the storm and wishing that Christmas could have lasted another 24 hours. Even in the truck stops, oases of self-reliance, Young men with snow plowing jobs and too much coffee in their blood compared notes excitedly with long-haul truckers who had been driven into refuge by the late-night chase closing of one section of the New York State Thruway. Around Albany, this was the ninth fiercest winter storm since records began to be kept in 1884. Not exactly the storm of storms, in other words, but one that no one will soon forget. In New York City, the weather wore a more benign aspect, making the city seem more seasonal than it has in a long time. Like all heavy storms, like this one brought power failures, motoring accidents, and a string of weather-related deaths. But it also brought something else, a welcome sense of confinement on Christmas Day and the glimpse of a world that looked as if it had been rechristened in the night. This was one dark cloud that left the silver lining behind when it finally blew away.